You're listening to the Be Better Off Show by Kelly+Partners.
Welcome to the Be Better Off Show, where we get around and meet interesting people who can help you be healthier, wealthier, and wiser. And today we're extremely privileged to have Peter Ivany, the chairman of the Ivany Investment Group. And I won't even bother to list all of his amazing achievements, because I think you'll soon discover that he's an amazing guy. He certainly had a great influence on me. Peter, welcome.
Thanks, Brett. Really appreciate being here.
Now, I was so keen to get you on today to share some of your life lessons, talk about your latest small project that I know involves some animals, and reflect on the impact of COVID and on people's investments generally. But I'd really love to start. I've got your rules here that I remember you sharing with me many years ago. I just thought they were great. Can I ask you to start with, what forced you to sit down and really think and reflect to come up with these ideas?
Well, I think these rules, it's a great sort of test, isn't it? To have a black swan event like we've had to see how well these rules are working. But I mean, I really set them up after 20 or 30 years in business, and with some of the ups and downs that we had with Hoyts and so forth. And I think they're holding down well. I think when you've been through some adversity, that's really helps you become successful later. But I think one of the most important rules is to survive, right? And in any event, black swan or not, and you can only survive if you got cash or you got money or you got something. So it's not a matter of revaluing all these assets that you can't realise or whatever. You have to have cash. And I think that's really important. But another really important point, particularly if you're the leader or the individual in a business or whatever you're running, is to have a lot of self-belief. Because I found during this period, I mean, I had a lot of people sort of ask for my advice, because, during the early 90s, we had so many sort of dark and difficult days. People thought that I had an added advantage, that, we got through that. So, COVID would be a snap. So they go, because they hadn't been through a difficult time. Now, if you have been through a difficult time, as per my previous point, you actually get this self-belief that you can, no matter how bleak things look, you can make it through. So I think there's got to be a self-belief that what you're doing is correct, that there is a timing, sometimes just a timing difference, but you'll just get through, and you've just got to keep at it, because the people that drop out of the game have no hope. And so you get things like self-belief, and if you're sitting there or about your business or any part of life and you're a little spectator and you're hanging on part-time, it gets more and more difficult. And also during periods like this, people look for leadership. They actually want help in pathways to find solutions to their problems. So if you've been in a situation where you've faced some adversity, that gives you that self-belief. And also you understand ways of getting through situations, thinking outside the square, revisiting your business and how you can operate it. There'll be a lot of businesses run completely different beyond this, apart from technological transformation, but less staff, much more efficiently. So out of that will come some huge positives. Yeah, I think not everyone can do this, but there's always got to be points in any life or career or business where you have to make that choice between stepping deeper into your business or trying to become more diverse. And diversity does enable you to sleep a bit better at night, because it's very rare that everything goes down at the same time. And if you look at the impacts of COVID, it's been positive for some industries, very negative for others. And if you've got some diversity, it really does sort of help. And I think the other point, and I had a lot more points when I know when I gave that speech before, but I've just sort of summarised them a bit, is to have really good information. So it's absolutely vital when things change so radically that you have, very timely information and IT systems, so you can pivot during this unprecedented event using words that are getting overused, but you can just repivot, be flexible, and just manoeuvre with the times and not let it sort of get ahead of you. And obviously if you have the odd, particularly in stock markets, or those 5% corrections, you've just got to be patient and get through that. But when you've just got sort of more normalised corrections, or what's happened in property, for example, which has been corrected significantly, you really need good information to ensure that you're on top of your business. And the rest of it is just working. And you do have to work a bit harder, because
Yep.
Even as a board member, I mean, I'm finding in a lot of my businesses, because the changes are so quick, or even the not-for-profits. I mean, there's periods during this pandemic, which is a long way from over, that we're meeting as a board every week just to get updates on various aspects of each businesses, because we've been involved in a couple of startups and they've obviously been buffeted a fair bit because they haven't got the years of resilience. But in the end, we've found solutions to all of those situations, but we have been meeting more frequently. And so you find that you could say it's tougher, but since I've been through much worse than this, I'd just say it's just a bit harder and you're much more hands-on and everyone's all in. So when you got to gather expertise from everybody, irrespective of their position in the business, and then utilise this and discuss everything, in quite a lot of detail in a very timely fashion.
And in real time.
And in real time to sort of make the right decision. So the teams that work really well together. So all that stuff you have in businesses about division, politics, people trying to get ahead, individual versus the firm, they're all out the window. You have zero hope of survival in this sort of environment if you don't have a unified sort of face and a unified strategy. So, and then you've got to rethink your strategy. So there's nothing like a black swan event to sort of test some of these rules out in real life.
It's interesting, Peter. And so one of my pet favorites has been that, often what people describe as a black swan is really just a white swan that's been sitting on the riverbank getting a bit of mud on it. It's just a brown swan. Like a pandemic has happened before, not a true black swan. The fact that people have short memories, we don't study history, and I think certainly in the larger corporate sector, people over 50 are rare. And even if they're there, they're seldom listened to. It has been interesting that there's been this view that this was a really an event that was impossible to anticipate when we've had SARS, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, Ebola, et cetera, et cetera. But it is, to your point, that, and somebody to pick up there, like having right information, getting together more often, and very much this theme of working as a team. In your story of building up Hoyts and the cinema group and very successfully transforming and growing that business, I recall us chatting about it, but my sense again there is that team, the objective over individual politics and priorities is obviously absolutely critical. Yeah, well, in the 87 crash in Australia, that really impacted our media and our property businesses particularly. We were caught in the middle of that. And what enabled us to survive is the fact that someone took leadership of that business, and that was me. Yep. I had a family and a management group that was very intent on following, so we could get everyone working together to get through our issues. And from a seemingly very difficult position, bit by bit, we found solutions. And then what happens is you get a few little green shoots, you start working on them. You start, from our point of view, we, got rid of excess assets. We had some banks help us sort of buy out other banks at a discount as those foreign banks were leaving the country. But the biggest thing we did was actually built value in the business from areas that we hadn't looked at before. So we made a lot of money out of concessions. We saved a lot of money. We ran it much more efficiently with the overheads. We increased our productivity in the theatres. So we added an enormous amount of value to the business. And that was by everybody working together. And we had to invent our own paradigm because our position was a little bit worse than some others because we had more debt and our debt was related to property. So the property we had to sell at sort of lower prices during that period to keep the cinema business running. But we found a way, and it's a bit of a footy term, that one. But, when you're deep down in the last quarter and you're a few goals down, you just got to find a way, and you can't find it in the textbook. So you just got to find it from within yourself. And I completely agree with you that these black swan events are just dressed up because stuff happens. And sometimes, and the difference between SARS and MERS has sort of happened away from, it was in Asia. So people just said, it will never happen to us. So that's a mistake that I don't think they'll make again. And in fact, the people in Asia that are doing so much better than Europe and America from this, they're saying, should have listened to what we did, And their health systems have been incredibly able at coping with this. And I talk with my Asian contemporaries every few weeks. We have this hook up by Zoom,
and they're doing quite well overall, different country by country. I mean, Taiwan's exceptional, but they've just been there before and they just know what to do. So hopefully that will happen with us, and it'll be less open to conjecture. There'll be a process.
Yep.
But then there'll be another sort of, to your point, underlying what's happening now. There are other sort of little events that could materialise. And it's quite interesting if you look at what China's done with this ant float this week. And they're obviously worried that they're going to have some sort of boil of overvaluation. And so they've gone in as they do and just taken control of this IPO, which to this level wouldn't happen in a Western country, but we can stand back. But maybe they're stopping something that is a potential danger to their system, from erupting. So yeah, we just got to. You're right. It's those lack of precautionary moves through the period that make the black swan events much worse. And yes, this time it was different because it wasn't economics.
Yep.
It wasn't politics. It was health, and that's something we didn't expect. And it was health in the Western world. So, out of it, we will learn something for sure, but we're still, really in it, and we won't really know what we've learned, I would guess, till towards the end of next year.
Yeah, very interesting. So to our listeners, I've been getting around for about 25 years asking wise people what they think about things, and there is a commonality of rule number one. So Peter's rule number one is all about surviving. Warren Buffett's rule number one is don't lose money, don't lose money, don't lose money.
Yeah.
And Jack Cowan, another local, said to me, Brett, if you don't get out, you can keep scoring runs. But if you do get out, you really, you can't score runs from the pavilion. So I think for all of us, anticipating difficult situations and knowing that they do come around with a little more regularity than we probably often consciously acknowledge is really important. Now, there's another one that you shared in here some years ago, which I really do think applies to you, and this is Rule 7. You must lead, and you've got to get the belief of others. I was away in Israel, and there was a difficult event, and there were some people who saw the difficulty and wanted to go somewhere else, back to the basement. And there was another guy there, older lad, and he said, "Yeah, I've got this car, fits 8 people. Anyone want to go to the party?" I think it was Peter Ritchie that said to me many years ago, "You can't go further than the people that you follow." And so you've got to choose good leaders. So this rule, you've got to lead. So Peter, you've always been somebody that's prepared to, look at a situation, get deep, and take action, take decisions. At this time where you're meeting more regularly, we are working, all of us, I think, harder, trying to watch the ball and sort of anticipate, as much as anything, where it's going. I see that as a real strength of yours. Is it something that when you're on boards, you're looking at management, you're saying to them, where are you leading? Are you looking, deep into the back half of this game, or the end of the season? Or what are you doing?
I try to get people sort of like playing chess, and you try to say, where do you want to be in different periods of time? Like, be very specific. And sometimes it's hard to have the confidence. They go, I think I might want to be there or a bit here. But just get them to be definitive of what their preferred position is, because often you're not sure if it's better or worse, but you've got to have a direction, and then you can change it and adapt it during the process. And then I'd say, well, okay, what are the obstacles of getting you to that point, And it starts off with self-belief, and then it gets to things like labour, capital, resources, whatever. And then you slowly try to break it down so you get through the obstacles. Now, some you can do in short time periods, and some are a bit longer. But you have to have a direction. I think that's just more and more critical. So, we looked at our business during this period, and every business is different through the group, but just the investment business. And we thought, well, we don't know how this will work out, so we're just going to go to a lot more cash. So we did that quickly, and that cost us a bit of money in the short term because we sold things not at the highest prices, but we had that buffer. So that means a sleep at night box was ticked. And then we thought it's going to be a deflationary type environment, so I'll move more things to fixed interest and bonds. I know you're going to ask me about this later. And then we looked at where we had problems that we might have to put capital into some of our private equity, and that's another reason to have more cash. So we just thought, well, at the end of this year, if we're sort of roughly where we are at the moment, with just a slightly different mix, we're well prepared for where we can go. And then down the track, these businesses will all go back to some sort of normality at different points in time, and we'll get the benefit of the uplift. Versus if you get caught, try to hang on to the whole lot, you'll end up sort of compromising, some of your good opportunities down the track. But this has been no different in being involved with the Swans, and obviously having a truncated season, the inability to get people to go and watch games and what's flown from that. Our revenue it's been restricted. It's, at NIDA where people have paid for courses and we've had to teach them online and still get degrees. So what's been quite inspirational for me is that every organisation that I've been involved with has really shown some phenomenal leadership under great duress. Like everyone's rocked up, gone to work,
found a way,
distracted, and just dealt with it and made sure that the institutions have made it through. And in some instances with a little bit of government support, which has been really, really helpful, but often just by pivoting and just by finding other ways to deliver their product. But really important to have this, again, the unified team. So in some cases we had people who just didn't want to, play ball, and it's been quite hard on them because we haven't had the same flexibility as we've had before. So it doesn't mean you compromise your whole value system, but you do have to prioritise because less resources. And back again, I'll keep going back to it all the time. Survival's number one. You come back in some form next year or the year after, and then you can rebuild again. So, they're the key things, but there's zero room for division anyway, because division just eats away at your business and your competitors in the end just overrun you. But at times like this, you just don't have the bandwidth and money, resources, whatever, because you've got too many day-to-day sort of problems. So it's something you have to get through. And you do have, I wouldn't call them distractions, but you do have other issues that have cropped up this year. We've had a lot of issues with Black Lives Matter with NIDA, how we deal with that and still ensure that we can get everyone's qualifications. So you've still got to deal with all of that. So you're basically just working harder.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So, Peter, to your point on leadership, I guess what I've noticed is where there's an organisation, a team or individual that's got a clear sort of view as to their direction and where they're trying to get to, it gives a point of focus for a team to rally around and move together.
I think the other side of that is you must stay positive. Negative looks after itself. Yeah. So I remember when we started the zoo, we start the zoo, we have the bushfires. Then we have the 45-degree days, like 2 or 3 times more than ever. And then we just start to get a breath of fresh air. We get the floods on the weekends, right? So what a phenomenal start that is. And then we get COVID.
And let's just step back. So just for our listeners. Yeah. So obviously I know Peter and his situation better than obviously some of our listeners. Peter had this idea, and I'd love you to share with us that Sydney should have a second zoo, Sydney Zoo, in Western Sydney near Blacktown. It's now open, operational, has been, I think, since December in some form. But Peter, can you share with us, where did the idea come from? How did you get involved? Why a zoo of all things? We all like animals, but we don't all choose to have a zoo. And then the obstacles to realise what is a phenomenal vision.
Okay, well, just to finish off my last point, and then I'll definitely start that. So then after 3 months of COVID, we start again. And what I said to everybody is, you know what, we're going to have a great run of luck now. It's our time. Yep. And in the beginning, I didn't believe it because we had so many obstacles. All of a sudden, we get sunny days. People are turning up, and it's going really well. And all of a sudden, within a month, people said, yeah, it's our time for a bit of luck. So you've got to have that positiveness.
Yeah, totally.
So just going back to the zoo had been around for about 11 months, and it's the brainchild of John and Jake Burgess. And they're involved with the Manly Aquarium and Darling Harbour. And they had this vision to build the zoo out in Western Sydney, the fastest growing large population area of Australia, and on flat ground. So, people that have grandchildren like myself can walk around with a stroller, even electric. Yeah. And also see animals with huge, on sort of from above and also at the level so children can see them. So with great sort of visual view of animals. and to focus on the larger animals, the Australian, Asian, European, and American, South American animals. And it was a really good concept, and they won a tender out at Western Sydney Parks to build, it's really a local asset more than what Taronga is, which is as much a tourist asset. And so I was at a Sydney Institute dinner, and one of the people that I'd invited to the dinner said, I've got this idea for a zoo. And it had been around the traps a bit. And I said, oh, yeah, I'll have a look at it, because I just sort of have this. I love these public-private things and social benefit things. And I always like in sport and movie theatres where people come to things. I think I've got a bit of expertise in that area. Anyway, so they came in and they said they can break even at, I remember it was like, at a number that I thought was very achievable, and I thought it would cost a bit more, which it did. And I thought, okay, I'll have a crack at it. But what I ensured, I didn't want to own more than 50% because I didn't want the responsibility like I had in Hoyts where, it all sort of came back to me. So I didn't, I'm an investment company at the end. I've got myself, but we needed to have someone who could provide more management if we needed. So we found the Scenic Railway people, the Hammond family, they came in. Then we got Richard Kovacs. We got a bunch of shareholders. And within a few months, we had the money raised. And then we got a small extension from the government because we'd just gone past the 12-month period, another month or so. And then we basically put it together. And that was 2015. We thought we'd be opening by 2017. So we didn't expect that we had a lot of negative response from Taronga and Featherdale, and pretty well. They were the primarily objectors to the zoo for various different reasons. And obviously Featherdale's a direct competitor, and so you'd have to think it was part of that. But we got through all those, and then we started to build the zoo, and these are 30 or 40 unique buildings. Yeah. It's not like building a block of flats. And so every one of them had their own issues, and that took a long time to get everyone on the same page. And the current chairman, John Harvey, did a terrific job at the end bringing all that together. But we also lost a fair bit of time in these court disputes, and basically it took us another year, so it cost us more with consultants and experts and people as we went to the PAC, which is the Public Advisory Committee. So it cost us a little bit more money to do that. Then we had to get the animals, and all of a sudden we couldn't get hippos, and there's a couple of animals we couldn't get. The gorillas, there was 3 males, and one of the 3 had started growing a bit and becoming more aggressive, so we couldn't have them together. So a range of things happened, but we then got 100 different animals, 1,000 animals, 100 different species together, but not quite February 2017, more like November 2019. So it went over budget and over time. But I think we've still got a very good zoo for what we put in. But again, if you actually see what happened, that we started off with 2 people with a vision, which is a terrific vision, that's the Burgess family. And then the rest of us all made a significant contribution. We all had to pitch in. I mean, there was 5 or 6 of us, and I remember I used to look around the board and say, hopefully we've got enough expertise to do this. Quite an undertaking. Now, remember that I wasn't even allowed to have a dog at home, because my wife said, you're just no good with pets. And so I had to buy a farm, which is just behind me, just to get 2 dogs. They'd be the 2 most expensive border collies on earth. So, but we found a way. John did a lot of work on getting the actual building parts done. He's now chairman. He's really putting the business together really well. We hired 3 or 4 significant new executives to sort of broaden the team out. And Jake's doing an excellent job of running the zoo, but now he's got good support around him. I was okay on strategy and had some idea of what it takes to build a business and where, when the train's coming straight at you through the tunnel and how you can sort of get out of the way, and also with government, because a lot of regulatory issues that we had to get through here, a lot of legal issues. And, then we got to a point where we opened it. It was a good opening on the days when it wasn't flooding or fire.
Or 45 degrees.
We had I think we had 12 days over 40 in January, and it's normally 4 or something. I don't know. It was just incredibly hot, and the bushfires and the rest of it. And then we had the floods on a couple of Sundays, and then we marched straight into COVID, and then we closed down. So, but it's all helped us because it was supposed to open in 17 and we opened in 19. Actually enabled us to get our team together and to get all the animals that we need in place, to get our expertise. There's not an accident that there hasn't been a zoo of that size built in New South Wales or in Sydney since 1916.
Yeah.
So it's not an easy thing to get. I don't know. We haven't found anywhere that's got 100 different species of animals and 1,000 animals together in that sort of short space of time.
Yeah.
And let alone the building complexity, the regulatory complexities, getting the right management in place. But we've now got a really outstanding team. We now have had, the government support has also been very helpful for us with DFAT and JobKeeper, like it has been for many people, particularly because we had to still feed the animals. I mean, it wasn't like feeding them, And so in the end, it's and up to the limits of the number of people that we have on good days, we're always completely sold out. And the other success story is that we've got 100,000 members. I think Taronga's about 120 or 130 for 104 years. But it's been exciting.
Great story.
And it's been difficult, but it's very rewarding. That'd be the way I would sort of say it. And I think we're feeling really optimistic going forward. But this is really ground up. It's a speculative sort of, if you look at it that way, but we're hoping that it's going to be like a 100-year investment. And really,
well, it has those elements.
Yeah,
it has those elements in that, you've got Taronga there's over 100 years old. The barriers to entry, every time you're in a difficult position, you must have thought to yourself, well, the next person's going to have it twice as hard.
Yeah, I did think that. And I always said, and even at the end when it took a bit longer and cost more, I wasn't worried because I felt we'd get the people in there, and I thought you get really rare opportunities. I've had it 3 times in my life probably, where you can build something of some substance.
Yeah.
And after Hoyts, whatever I wanted to do, I didn't want it to be international anymore because it's too compromises your life.
Yep.
And even I just kept saying to Jake, look, don't worry, we've built a great zoo here. And we've got so much opportunity to build it out and put more animals and create breeding programs and animal welfare and hospitals and natural habitats. We still haven't built the whole zoo out. So there's enormous amount of opportunity there.
Layering.
And, there's going to be 3 million people there in the next 10 years as we're at 2.3, 2.4 now. And they've got something that is part of their own community. And there's a lot of happy people here. The government's happy. We're happy. Our sponsors are happy. So, and really for animal welfare, it's good because a lot of those animals have found a home and they're well looked after. So I think it's, it's, as I said, it's been very rewarding. And the amount of buy-in that we've got from our management, they all sort of took sacrifices during COVID when we were closed and the rest of it, and all happily to do so because they just believed in the vision. And and this needs, everyone rowing in the same direction. But said it's it's one of these things, and it's only at stage 1 where someone had the vision and we found a way to execute it. We didn't run out of money, and we sort of, even though we probably didn't cover every base with expertise, over time we've sort of filled those gaps, and something to be proud of.
Yeah, amazing. So for anyone listening, Sydney Zoo, it's out, it's up, it's running. And I think, that very short overview, it's an incredible story of how to build what I expect will be a 100-year asset with enormous complexity, barriers to entry. And so I guess I'd love to lead in there. Peter's a renowned investor with a broad interest in all sorts of asset classes, including zoos and other such things. Peter, you mentioned earlier, but how do you think just generally about investing? Is it dependent on your stage of life and your particular objectives, or what is the approach that I guess you've taken over the course of your career to build yourself up to the position that you are now?
Yeah, I think when you start, you don't think about the end, and you just think about building something of some value. And it's always been, for me, it's not the money as much as building something that makes sort of a bit of a difference and something that, I can feel sort of proud of. As I've got older, that's still part of the equation. I don't know how many I've had 3 sort of private equity, new startups at this stage. I'm 66 now, so I'm probably coming to the end of that phase. Plus, I want to see these work out. But so as an investor today, I really ensure that I've got good cash flow versus sometimes just, building assets. So I think that's really important as you get older, that you can pay all your bills, meet all your commitments, charity, whatever else, and all your business. So I think that's important. So we've got a very big fixed interest business, and we've got a big property lending business, and that sort of underpins a lot of the things that we do. And the next thing then I try to do is I try to find some themes, because the stuff where I put a lot of my time into, this and Allied, fair bit of time, and IMAX, I'll be our 3 private equity businesses at the moment. And also we've got a technology fund, so it's really 4. They take my time, but the passive investments is where most of my money's invested. So, we've really looked at technology because we feel that with or without COVID, we're in a really transformative phase. So we invest a lot in new technology, and we're seeing that move away from just information like the internet with Google to more the Internet of Things, more artificial intelligence, robotics. And there'll be a lot of things in health. Now, health is a longer time frame, but it's sort of one of the areas that we'll be focusing. We tend to do it in funds because we can't pick it ourselves. We need other people to sort of choose. So that's been pretty important. I mean, going forward, we'll do less in property for the next year or so. There's less to do for a start, and definitely commercial and retail have got to have a readjustment period. And a lot of consumer-facing industries will have some difficulties, hospitality and travel in particular. So even though people will jump in on the basis that the vaccine will solve all problems immediately, we don't, we're not as aggressive, we're not as optimistic at that. We think this will be a fairly long haul. And I guess what we're now starting to also do more of, and we've done it in the past, is we'll be looking more to Asia.
Yeah.
Because we really feel that this east-west divide is going to become a lot bigger.
So I was going to ask you, local versus global, and then east versus west. Are you 80-20 global to domestic, or are you 50-50?
Probably not.
Or?
Probably, but we used to be 50-50, and I would say now that we'd probably be 65-35-ish.
65 local?
No, 65 overseas, I'd say.
Yep.
Probably 60-40.
Yeah.
Because most of our fixed interest stuff, it's not here, it's really all global because the market's much deeper. Technology is mainly global, and our property lending is here. And even the funds management business that we're in is global shares in technology. So more and more it's becoming global. And as we did when we first moved into fixed interest after 2008, when all the rules changed for capitalisation and you could invest in all these bank sort of cocos, that we moved from country to country as they sort of moved and raised capital, through these fixed and floating sort of bonds. So we just moved countries and just watched as the recovery went in different countries, and we just moved from country to country, started in Australia and then moved through the other countries. But it's now much easier with the internet to do things globally. And even though, because with Australia, the property side we understand well. Obviously, our businesses in Allied, IMAX and the Zoo are close to us, so we understand where they are and what they're doing. But you're then really looking, if you're really in the stock market, you're really looking at either the banks or mining, where there's a sort of an advantage. And mining's never been a real expertise of ours, so we haven't done much of that. And we've done some in some funds, but not much. And banking is, under threat because of fintech, and there's no question that business is going to be disintermediated continually, and you can sort of see that. And that's even before we get into cryptocurrency and the rest. Because someone said to me, "Would you rather own Bitcoin or the Venezuelan, whatever the currency in Venezuela is?"
Yeah.
Where their government is and so reliant on oil. So, over time, once they can get the computing efficiency up, I think there will be a sort of transactional currency, because it's too easy for governments to monitor every transaction. It's just got so many benefits, but it takes up a lot of energy. And someone said if you do it, it takes up more energy than what's, it's a bigger carbon footprint than the aeroplane industry. But it also is we're not quite there yet, but I think over time And a lot of these products you might be getting on a global basis. Like you might be getting health insurance outside of Australia because just all the markers will be, your health will be easy to mark, gene testing and the rest of it. So I think
interesting, like with Lloyd's of London, the deep and the reinsurers have been deep global pools for years and years, but they've been accessed sort of locally, and there'll be some disintermediation through technology, you would think of.
I think so. I mean, it's even going to be trickier with insurance because you might have to you might lose a lot of your privacy to give insurers the information they need for you to have a lower policy than somebody else. So it becomes like a credit policy. And therefore it doesn't have to be held in an Australian health company. It can be held anywhere. And
I think it's the same with education as well, Peter, in that,
yeah,
it's a massive, massive sector here. And, students, do they need to travel anywhere really to access education in the future? Does that tier out that sector? It's another massive global industry. So
yeah,
I think,
the only proviso I'd put with that is that there's a lot of these things you can just do on the net. I mean, if you want to borrow money for a house, you don't need 10 people in a bank to take you for lunch and look at the credit. I mean, there's enough information readily available now. I mean, we lend on cars and bikes, and you can get it pretty well instantaneously, and it's accurate. But there will be some things, and education's still part of it, where people have to work collaboratively. So but you might be able to do it on the net. You mightn't have to do it all in person. But I don't think it'll all be. I don't think it'll all be on the net. But this global advance, I think the only way you can stop it spreading is by regulation. And you've got to ask yourself if the regulators will be able to be that far ahead of these businesses. And then you're going to have a number of issues that if they regulate harder in America than China, then China will just get ahead.
Yep.
And so therefore they're actually restricting the growth of their own companies through regulation, but enabling another territory to get ahead in other markets. So all of that is all got to play out. But from an investor's point of view, that's becoming more and more the main game. That if you're investing in outside of real estate, if you're investing in, well, commodities one side, but if you're investing in businesses, they have to have some relation to technology.
Yep.
Because the efficiencies are too great.
Yeah, absolutely. It does seem that the example with the Ant IPO, it's almost like people see the Chinese market as so large that they don't perceive any of the sovereign risk. Even with the Chinese government stopping that IPO, people are still imagining that it's business as usual, but it does appear to be business as unusual.
Oh, yeah, well, it's very difficult for us to adapt to a regime that's so different from ours. And this is going to be an ongoing problem. I mean, we're going to be trading with regimes that we don't agree with how they operate, but we'll have no choice. They'll be operating under different rules. And it's hard for us to sort of understand, one, how we can, in some cases, how we can even trade with them on a whole range of, of other issues. It's much based on humanity and democracy, outside of even business issues, let alone how they run their businesses. So that's going to be an adaptation for us as the East gets far more powerful, because in a way, there may be times we have to adapt to them versus in the past them adapting to our rules. But the Ant thing is really interesting. I haven't heard anyone they've stopped this thing now for a couple of weeks, and it's all been very quiet. It hasn't been in the papers. There's nothing to report on, so they've all done it internally. And we're not even sure, except for the odd rumour that it's going to come out at half price. We're actually not even sure what the rules will be when it finally does list.
If it ever does.
If it does, yeah. So it's very, very different than what would happen, in the countries that we're used to dealing with. So this is something that we're just going to have to adapt. And COVID just accelerates that, because if you take the view that America's economy won't get back to where it was in 2019 for 2 or 3 years, and China's jumped ahead, then this race, income per capita, highest GDP, that's been accelerated. And once that's been accelerated, China will be able to afford to put more and more resources into the more value-added areas of artificial intelligence, of medicine, health, all of these areas. And it may start starting to get encroach on where America's got a real strong not so much dominance, but a really strong position in some of those industries. And already in China, there's a couple of their major companies replicate what's being done in America. And if they get ahead technologically, then America takes another step backwards, and that would change the world significantly. Now, whether China has the system to cope with someone like an Elon Musk, who's out of the square, keeps getting funding, that still we don't know, but they're definitely getting more educated, doing much more research, can control their population better at this point, and can really achieve their objectives. So if we get back to what we were talking before with national unity versus what's happening in America now, that's going to, and the fact that they're already showing significant growth rates, where America's over how many, 160,000 or something cases yesterday. There must be an advantage in that, and it's not that easy to catch up. So this East versus West thing, and it's going to be a big discussion point next year, will definitely have some impact. And as always with these things, you can sort of envisage the impact, but you can't quite see it. But next year, I'm sure that the different handling of COVID worldwide will have a differential impact. Now, if you just take Australia, this should be a real advantage for us, because we've got a lot of things that people want. But the two issues I think that are holding us back is this lack of national unity is a problem. And obviously how we're dealing with China is potentially a problem. So they're things that I think we have to address, because obviously they're, at this point, half of our exports virtually. And the state disunity, which is holding our economy back to some degree, might be good for winning elections in specific states, but I think for Australia, and we're part of the global world, and if you believe it, it's one nation, it's something that we have to address. Now, thankfully, our last state election is next March or April in Perth, and hopefully we can start working together again, because we've done an outstanding job with getting on top of COVID, really up to anyone. We'll end up being just on about 100th in the world, which for our size is
amazing.
Very good performance. And so we can then start to take advantage of, getting the students back, getting some tourists back here, start to move into some more value-added industries and build the infrastructure necessary to build the country. So we should use this advantage for us to get ahead. And but very urbanised community, highly educated. So we're in a really good position to really improve our position in the world. I think those two things have to be addressed.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see if the government can make some big bets to, I reflect on Elon Musk. You mentioned that, Peter, and, the US government lent them $4 billion at one point to help them keep moving. And, if you speak to federal politicians here, they say we don't want to, we're not interested in industry policy because we don't want to pick winners. But, with the advantages that we do have, it should be obvious that we could assist some of our industries to win.
Yeah, I think the government's, I don't think that's the right way of putting it. You don't have to pick, individuals is another story, but you have to pick directions for the country, because Australia's only got 25 million people. There's not that many levers you need to pull to make it work. We've got a very high, we've got 3 trillion in savings. We're really financially very solid, highly educated, motivated workforce. So the government's got to help us in the right direction to a significant part of the economy to ensure that we get that. And yes, if we did have an Elon Musk and he wanted to come here, and we have to, might be too small a market for him, I would guess, or they did go to Adelaide, that would be a great initiative, because if you look at any industries, they start with some support when it's difficult. People have to be in the same area and feeding off each other. You can see it in the film business, you can see it in Silicon Valley.
Yep.
There's always
see it on Wall Street, their ecosystems.
Yeah, and why America is strong and China's a bit not as good in this area is that where they are strong is they get the best people in the world to come to a specific area, and they all work off each other. Yep. And they just keep building. You can watch it. It works with sportsmen. It works with elite businessmen. It works with anyone. If you have the world's best together in one place, then you can be competitive. You can see it in Israel. And so I think the governments, look, clearly one of the things that's come out of COVID too is the role of government will increase.
Yeah.
So it's really important that direction's right and the resources are spent in the right areas. So I'm confident. I think the federal government's done an outstanding job, and we've been very lucky. And, we're lucky we had 25 years of great government here with, Hawke and Keating and Costello and Howard, and that really set us up where we are today. And now we're, again, got extremely good government at federal level and some state level. And as long as they work together, we've got a real opportunity to take advantage of what's happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, for our listeners, I really want to thank Peter for joining us today. I wanted to keep the episode to 45 or so minutes. There's never enough time when you've got somebody, Peter, of your insight and capability with us, and I tremendously appreciate you making the time today. For anyone that's listened, I hope you've got some insight there that'll help you in your business. I agree that there's huge opportunity in Australia vis-a-vis the world at the moment because we have been relatively, untouched by the virus, and I do think we've got good governance and government right now that has helped us. But ultimately, as you've said, Peter, if you've got a good direction and you can stay positive and outwork a situation, then you've got a bit going for you. So I appreciate your time so much today.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Be Better Off Show. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate and review on Apple Podcasts.